Yo, what is going on, everyone? I'm Daniel Hofflich, and you are watching Final Fan TV. This is Final Podcast 6. Man, it's a special one. One of my goals when starting FFTV was to spotlight Final Fantasy developers, voice actors, and content creators on this podcast. So far, we have been blessed with FF7 novels author MJ Gallagher to discuss his latest work, The Norse Myths That Inspired Final Fantasy VII. Excellent book, excellent conversation. Check that one out. Final Podcast 2. Last week, we were graced by the presence of John Eric Bentley. At this point, I think that was 2 weeks ago. But that was an amazing conversation. What an all-around great guy. I mean, like so many good topics that we talked about. What a swell guy. And then on Final Podcast 5, just last week, we had Soldier First Class. Now, when I started up Final Fan TV, the first two people that I reached out to were Soldier First Class and this man right here, the Night Sky Prince. Now, the reason why is because I watched a lot of Night Sky Prince videos leading up to Final Fantasy VII Remake. And man, I tell you what, I respect his content. I respect his thoughts, his viewpoint on these games. And it's just an absolute privilege to have Night Sky Prince on FFTV. How you doing, Night Sky Prince?
I'm doing pretty great. It's a lovely Saturday morning or afternoon, I suppose now. I've been waking up a little too late nowadays, and so morning, afternoon is all kind of blended together. But I'm really glad that you've had me on here, man.
Man, we're really glad that you accepted. This is awesome. Like I said, man, I really respect your work. Joined with me in the party is Vinny McGovern and Reed Daniels. How you guys doing?
Doing
Vinny?
pretty well. Doing pretty well. Like Prince said, it's the whole quarantine thing, not having to wake up as early as I've always had to, and everything kind of just like there's no morning, noon, and night for me anymore. It's just wake up, eat, and then find stuff to do.
Reed, what's up, man?
Yeah, like what Vinny said, now with COVID going on, it's not really morning, noon, or night. It's just kind of wake up, grab brush, put on a little makeup, hide the scars and fade away the shake-up. Oh, God. All right. System. All right. Chop Suey reference. That's how I'm doing.
All right, good. But before we begin, because we have a lot to talk about on this podcast, like Final Fantasy XVI, of course, whether or not Clive should go solo or if he should have a party. That's just one of the topics that we're going to talk about. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce ourselves as Final Fan TV. On this channel, we aspire to create awesome Final Fantasy content that we hope you enjoy watching and or listening to. Currently, we are focused on our weekly show, Final Podcast. That's this show. As the channel levels up, much like a character gains new abilities, we have plans to start new shows like Let's Plays of the entire franchise, in-depth reviews of each Final Fantasy, and more frequently posted news and rumors shows, and a whole lot more. Man, if you could just get a behind the scenes of the stuff we have been planning, you would be so excited. You are among the first to start a new game with FFTV. So we ask that you attack the thumbs up button, that you limit break the subscribe button, and you level grind the share button, because to not share a video that has Night Sky Prince in it would just be insane. Come on, guys. Come on. This is Night Sky Prince. Share it. Thank you so much for watching. Let's get it started, guys. Final Fantasy XVI. Now, when I reached out to Night Sky Prince, I said, "Is there a topic you want to talk about, man?" He said, "It's got to be 16."
Gotta be 16.
Gotta be. What's up, man? How you feel about 16 right now? Just like broad thoughts, or just, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Thoughts on it.
First trailer considered.
Oh boy. Final Fantasy 16. I'm sure you guys probably saw my reaction video to it. I was very thrilled. part of the reason why I'm so thrilled about Final Fantasy 16 is because of the reputation behind Final Fantasy 14. And I've kind of I'm not gonna lie to you. I've kind of sidelined 14 over the years because I was just like, nah, MMO. I don't want to invest the time, the money, and all this other stuff into it. And just recently, I've been really diving into Final Fantasy 14. I'm like right in the middle of Stormblood right now. And one of the interesting things that I'm finding about Final Fantasy 14 is that it's really just a Final Fantasy game that happens to be an MMO. And there's a lot of people who I know you asked me about 16. I don't want to go too far in a tangent about 14, but it's a Final Fantasy game for people who truly love just everything about the Final Fantasy series and the way they find ways to just give love to that whole series just within this one game. And that makes me extremely happy to know that many people from that team are now working on Final Fantasy 16 because they just have like this understanding of what the series is supposed to be, or at least the way I feel about it. So 16 is looking pretty good. I think we have some concerns, like you mentioned earlier, about there seeming like there's only the one party member, Clive. Although I think they will reveal some other party members so far. I'm really digging it. I'm digging the fact that they're going with a mature style, and the fact that it is likely to be an M-rated game. The fact that that means that they could potentially not hold back and go into places that Final Fantasy was not previously allowed to go because they were very adamant about keeping that teen rating. I'm also excited about combat. I think 7 Remake had fantastic combat, but I think when you look at maybe like 15, for example, when they were really trying to first switch to action combat, they really didn't quite know what exactly they were doing. And I think 15 turned out okay in terms of its combat system, but 16, they got the battle planner from Devil May Cry, Ryota Suzuki, and I think he's going to make sure that combat is going to be where it needs to be. And I think that just that combination between the incredible storytelling that something like Final Fantasy XIV offers, and having to be able to have that tight action gameplay that you might expect from a Devil May Cry is going to be a hit.
Oh man, that was a fantastic job of basically summarizing everything we're going to talk about here, because we are going to dive into rated M Final Fantasy 16. This is going to be the first mainline Final Fantasy title that's rated M. And I've said last week with Soldier on the show, I was like, Final Fantasy 7 Remake should have been rated M.
100%.
Because Remake, or I'm sorry, the original game is a very mature title. And I think it had all the makings of a rated M title. And so when we're talking about 16, how rated M are we going here? Are we going language? Are we going nudity, sex scenes? Are we going uncomfortable circumstances like Last of Us 2? Are we going, I mean, because we're comparing, I make the comparison to Last of Us 2 just because this is a revenge story. And we see how I think Last of Us 2 executes a revenge story absolutely phenomenally. And I think they should draw some inspiration from that title, even though they're two totally different games. But yeah, so do we find ourselves in really uncomfortable situations like we did in that game with 16? Do we get language? Do we actually get, we get that what we got in the original Final Fantasy VII is essentially what I'm saying, but this time unfiltered and let's go. You know what I mean?
and that's really what I wanted out of 7R2. And they were actually surprised me with what they were able to get away with for a teen rated game. Like some of that stuff, like especially like literally everything in Walmart. I was kind of like, oh, they can do this. I was like, okay, well, not bad. But yeah, being able to go M-rated just really, I'm not sure what the expression is, lifts the curtain back, and they're just able to expose everything. And that's sort of what I want. I mean, we've all known that there's always been, like, in every Final Fantasy universe, there's sort of like these dark corners that are implied, but they can't really like go in there. And now I kind of want them to like explore those sort of darker elements of this fantasy world. It seems like they are not holding back at all, because in that trailer we saw, they like literally cut Joshua's dad's head off like like
Right in
squirting
front of
the
his
blood-
face, man.
squirting the blood like on his face. Like
Your reaction video was very similar to mine. I remember watching your reaction video, and you're like, "Yo, this is rated M. This is rated like look at the blood. I know I've said it like 1,000 times, but look, this is rated M."
yeah,
that was me the whole time, man.
It kind of makes you wonder where that decision came from between developing Remake and developing this title, because they said that the title has been in development for at least 4 years in some capacity. So there's been a huge overlap between developing this and Remake. And so it's very interesting that when it came to doing certain things, like they weren't able to preserve the Genova blood trail in Remake, but somehow somehow you go to 16 and then they have like blood squirting on a little kid's face. And
I love it.
I love it
man.
too. I love it too. It just it almost and another thing too is that I really wonder to what degree Western titles have influenced them going with the M-rated.
Like Witcher. Like
Yeah,
Witcher
the Witcher. There seems to be Witcher 3 influence. I guess that's kind of cliche to say at this point, but it's still true. I feel like they were definitely inspired by The Witcher 3 and many other Western titles.
Dark Souls 3.
Yeah,
Definitely. I see so much Dark Souls.
yeah, and I think they were looking at those types of titles, and they were looking at how popular those titles are in the West, and how many sales those games are getting. Because I mean, The Witcher 3 is at like some astronomical number. I want to say like 28 million or something like that. It's really, really, really high. It's like one of the highest selling games of all time at this point. So in some ways, it's impossible to ignore it because of how influential it's been, and how influential a lot of Western RPGs have been over the past 2 generations. And I feel like they are incorporating some of that. And one of the big things about Western RPGs is it's fairly rare to come across a Western RPG that's not M-rated. They're like all M-rated. They're all M-rated, and they all focus on a more, not necessarily gory, although there is some degree of gore in there, but they all have some themes of like gore, some types of sexual themes and things like that in them. And so I feel like to some degree they may be trying to not necessarily one for one emulate, but they're definitely taking notes on what's happening in those spaces and incorporating them probably in the Final Fantasy 16.
So I think like we're talking about influence and stuff. I think kind of where they're going with, and part of where I see Dark Souls a lot is it just seems like there's a lot of like gothic kind of influence and like that dark. So I think that my first thought looking at it was that they're going to try to implement like horror elements, like the way that they're doing this. I love how they always change like the summons roles in the game and in the universes, like where they are, like in this one, like where they're like these basically malevolent deities kind of thing, you know, and obviously possess you, or you know, vessels and all. I see so much room for like horror elements with that, you know. And I think it's going to be like really atmospheric, and I think that's where a lot of like the M rating is going to come from.
What was it from the Final Fantasy 16 website? One of the cities, or what do they call it, with the clans, or the under the banner, one of them realms? Actually, one of the realms, thank you. But yeah, one of the realms actually like despises the dominants and basically thinks of them as like cursed beings and stuff. So that's kind of interesting that you would think that it would go to horror route. Maybe in that realm is kind of that atmosphere.
I can see like tribalist, like
like
what's like ritualistic. Like there's going to be, I think, like the cultural disparity between like how they interact with like the gods, or I can't, you just said it, I can't think of their actual titles, dominance or whatever. But like it wouldn't surprise me at all if we had like some like pagan influence sort of thing, like ritual sacrifice, something like that, some kind of just crazy gnarly stuff happening like on a societal level, you know, because it's like how to appease them, I guess.
One of the cool things about no, I was just gonna add on to that and say that one of the cool things about Final Fantasy XIV and that bit like reminded me of it is that they're so good about fleshing out, like, if this concept was real, how would people actually respond to it? And that's
Yeah.
one thing that the 14 team is exceptionally good at.
Yeah, I had got 14 when it first came out, and I shelved it in like a week. And then like Realm Reborn came out, and that was such a vast improvement.
Yeah, it was great.
The Kefka boss fight was just one of the best experiences of my life. It just made me so happy to fight Kefka.
I do want to like come back and revisit your love for 14, because you know, like you said, there is a lot of comparisons between 16 and 14. So I do want to kind of come back to that. I have a question about Shadowbringers in particular. But I
haven't gotten there yet.
You haven't? Okay.
I'm still in the middle of Stormblood, so I'm still working my way there. I'm like a very new Final Fantasy 14 person. I say new, but I'm technically a legacy member because I had my account back when 1.0 came out.
You just did what I did and just never actually went all the way with it. You know?
Yeah,
that's kind of like how I am now that they have the trial, like that free trial that basically takes you all the way past the first expansion. I think it is like, I think it's time for me to jump in. I haven't tried it out either.
It is,
be honest.
Dude. It's so good. It's so good. It's become. I feel late to the party, and I shouldn't be because it's a Final Fantasy title. But that whole MMO talk seems to like really distract people, and so now I'm doing like everything in my power to shake that out of people and be like, I don't care if it's a damn MMO. You need to play this because it's a Final Fantasy game. It's really good, and it's one of the best Final Fantasy titles right now.
And it's technically a mainline title too. I mean, it's numbered.
Yeah,
it's not a spin-off. So
yeah, definitely.
Vinny, what do you think about the mature Final Fantasy rating here? How dark do you want it to go? What do you want to see in a mature rated Final Fantasy?
I want to see kind of like what Reed was saying, like more horror aspects to it. Something that's like you know, I love Dark Souls. I love The Witcher. I really like that dark and gloomy feel. It I just feel like it makes you what's the word I'm looking for? Just more absorbed in it when it's not, you know, when it's not like all bright and vibrant and everything. I feel like I love horror movies, so I get more attached to like psychological, like Mind Betty Jacob's Ladder type stuff where, you know, it's just like, it doesn't have to be like scary, but you know, like that whole like story with Clive where it's kind of like his descent into madness. Like he's seeking revenge, and you're just kind of like Hellblade, if you've ever played Hellblade or whatever. Just, you know, it's very environmentally driven, and you know, you kind of just like hours go by.
It's an oppressive atmosphere. Like it's like real thick atmospherically. So it's suspense and everything. It's kind of like, I think that's what you're trying to say with those titles, Vinny.
Yeah, like, you know, you can get wrapped up in it and kind of like feel their, you know, like feel their emotions as well, because it's so dark. And I mean, the media does it all the time. They play on, you know, they don't report happy stuff because it's the messed up stuff that really gets ratings and everything. So, you know, people like to be involved, like people like to see like stuff like that happening, because when you see how bad something can be, it makes it seem like the bad stuff in your life isn't as bad, because you're like, wow, at least I'm not that guy, you know, like you know, like that whole thing. So I hope with the M rating they take it in a more horror, psychological like feel. I feel
where where the atmosphere matches the tone. Like this is very much a revenge story, and you kind of just want it to be like, just let the atmosphere be dark, and like you said, descent into madness kind of gets me thinking, like, you know, start off with your typical Final Fantasy, you know, lightheartedness, don't like carrots, and then eventually, you know, eventually it just becomes really, just really dark. And another topic that we brought up last week with Soldier, I thought was so good. I would love to see it because you don't really get to see it. What if Clive ends up being a villain at the end? Like, you played the role of the villain. Of course, at the end, I'm sure there will be some kind of redemption arc to whereas in like, I said, I brought it up. I was like, yeah, at the end, yeah, you find out you're the villain, but then, in typical Final Fantasy fashion, you fight a god and you're just like, okay, wait a second. Maybe I need to do this instead of being the bad guy or something like that. You're like, you end up fighting like these forces beyond you. But yeah, I was like, if you descend into becoming this villain and like the party members that you pick up, if you do pick them up, which we'll talk about in a second, and it's like, if you do pick up these party members, what if they're not good people either, because they're helping you achieve your goal, which is not a good goal to have.
That'd be great.
I thought
that's very morally great.
Right. Yeah.
I like
and
it.
once again, you go to The Last of Us 2, like, where you get that morally gray, and like revenge should be a very grayed tone. Like, there's no good, there's no bad. It's just, you know what I mean? I would love to see that. Not the typical Star Wars, there's light and dark, earlier Final Fantasies, Warriors of Light, Warriors of Dark. I would love to see that. I would actually like to see Clive go down and say like, hey, I'll become the Warrior of Darkness if it allows me to achieve this goal. I think that would be really cool, man. One thing I do want to talk about here is I posted on Twitter a question. I said, with back-to-back episodes, podcast discussing Final Fantasy XVI with Soldier First Class and Night Sky Prince today. I'd like to extend the convo to all the Final fans. Should 16 go with a rated M, go all in with the rated M dark story, or balance lighthearted comedy with the serious themes? We're used to that balance with Final Fantasy. Pretty much every Final Fantasy has these really, really dark undertones, and then they're balanced out with Moogles and Chocobos and fishing and stuff like that.
Final Fantasy X's laughing scene.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Which actually is kind of depressing in itself, you know what I mean? But yeah, 66% wanted to go all in with a mature story, like ditching the balance and just going all in with a Witcher 3 style, just dark, mature throughout.
So if we're theory crafting, which is like my favorite thing in the world, and I just want to mention it before I lose it, because we were just talking about it, but like the idea of becoming the bad guy, and something like as soon as I saw the trailer, I love doing this, but I immediately saw that like his brother, I can't think of his brother's name now.
Joshua.
Thank you. Was a vessel for like Phoenix, like essentially like the Phoenix summon. So it's like as soon as I saw that, I'm like, all right. So at the end, I just imagine like Clive's gonna die, and because Phoenix is just known for like resurrection. I just feel like that's gonna be like the climactic part of the whole story. Is it's gonna be something to do with Phoenix resurrecting someone, like probably the main character. I like the idea of like the main character dies, but even if they do that, they're gonna have some fallback where there's like a means to bring them back.
It could be even
when
more
I see Phoenix, I just think of that.
Could be like metaphorical in a way, like where it could be kind of like Final Fantasy IV with Cecil, where his dark knight dies and then he's
becomes
reborn
a paladin. Exactly.
Yeah. Could be kind of like that with Clive, where he descends full on to madness, becoming the villain, and then he can be reborn as the hero. I would love to see that at the end of the game, though, rather than the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the climactic part, I think, would be that. And then
that's a really cool theory.
Then you pretty much go and you can pretty much have the last boss fight like right after that.
One of the things I had thought about is that what if he goes and seeks revenge for them killing Joshua, and then Joshua, like a phoenix, comes back, and then that like throws a wrench in like his motivational goal, like his motivation for his revenge.
That could be his redemption arc. Like he's done all these bad, horrible acts, and then Joshua comes back like the phoenix he is.
Yeah, and then like the whole time he's like, oh, what the hell did I just do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. And then what if he can't live with his guilt, man?
No. They can go in so many great directions, honestly, with like the building blocks that they have right now. So,
and the M rating.
Yeah, and M rating, so they don't have anything holding them back. I think that's really why, something like Nier Automata, which could not have even existed if it was like a teen rated game, not in the same way. It would not be nearly as good.
It's a great game too.
And
That's a good point.
yeah, and I kind of want them to lean into that idea of telling a story that you can only tell once you have all these restrictions removed, and not just be like what some people are imagining in their head and just being like very edgelord because they can squirt blood, that they should just squirt blood everywhere. Yeah, or that because they can show a boob, they can just like all
yeah, here you go.
yeah.
We're rated M.
God
Yeah.
of War treatment.
Yeah, so
All right,
I mean,
so in here, in this town, it's going to be these 37 women with side boob, and then the hero goes to the next dungeon, and there he sees more side boob.
yeah. So I mean, they could go in that direction, but honestly, I prefer them to do something where it's just like we have it there so that we can just throw anything we want at you. And that's also what I like about it being M-rated, is that there's a certain unpredictability to it. If they want to cut a guy's head off to like give you that real shock value, they can do it. And in fact, they did it in the trailer. So yeah, it's the fact that there is nothing that they can't put in there if they don't want to. And that's the idea that I like.
Yeah, I'm all aboard on that one as well. So speaking of balancing comedy and seriousness, now if we're not going like completely all in with this mature story, which I personally don't think they are. I think it's going to be like you said, very reminiscent of Final Fantasy XIV, where it still has all your staples of the series. You got your Moogles and your just lighthearted comedy every now and then. I would like to see that at the beginning of the game. Now, a big part of Final Fantasy is mini games. So Vinny, would you care to talk about mini games here and set us up for a conversation?
Yeah, so like, I feel like the popularity and success of Final Fantasy largely relies on how fun their little diversive mini games are. Like Final Fantasy VII has the gold saucer. That place, that's awesome to just take a break from the main story and go and have some fun. Final Fantasy VIII had a triple triad that turned into its like own real life game. People love that so much. 9 had like a lackluster mini game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was terrible. Their card game was just not very good.
Yeah.
And then 9 wasn't as successful as 7 and 8. And then 10 was widely successful, and it had Blitzball and the Monster Arena. And I personally think Blitzball is probably the most fun Final Fantasy minigame. But
I spent as much time playing Blitzball in my save game, like my perfect game, like Anima, God, what's his name? Yoshimbo. Yeah. Perfect game and all that. And I still had more time played on Blitzball on that save than I did in this actual world.
Yeah, because Blitzball was a lot of fun, especially when you learned that Brother was like the best Blitzball player and he could just outspeed everybody and just swim in circles after you score 1 point. But so like with an open world Final Fantasy, like what it seems like they're going to try and do with 16, or at least have zoned maps. Like I was thinking the style, like the Witcher style, would go really well with like the Red Dead Redemption 2 like mini games where you walk into a tavern and you just sit down and you start playing whatever kind of mini game with somebody. I feel like the mini games are what really makes people remember. When you're thinking back on a Final Fantasy, you remember the main story, and then you think and you're like, oh, I remember those mini games too. I feel like popping that in and playing some Blitzball or whatever. So I just like what kind of mini games would you want to see? Maybe some return, or like a mini game that you've always wanted to see in a Final Fantasy that you could probably see in 16.
Oh boy. Oh man. I think cart games would be good. It's been a long time. It's been a long thing. I think 14 added like triple triad, speaking of which, like relatively recently, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I think a card game would actually be really cool. I don't know if I could ever imagine them like doing something like Blitzball ever again or anything like that, because Blitzball honestly is like it's more complicated than the actual game is in terms of mechanics. Holy shit. And it's just, I don't know. I would like to see Chocobo breeding. That would be cool to see that return as well.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the mini games too, particularly in like 7R, like a lot of the simpler ones like darts were actually like relatively fun and just simple and like really easy to get behind. And those tend to be the types of mini games that I personally prefer. But yeah, actually I think we're overdue for one, returning to the moon, because 16 we're going to the moon in 16. We already and two, we need to play card games again.
Nice.
Final Fantasy Joker Stars.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that they're just gonna buy into this whole medieval times theme here. I would love to see Chocobo jousting.
Oh,
That would be pretty cool.
That would actually be cool. That'd be
And
cool.
like axe, like hatchet tossing or like axe throwing, like just kind of medieval times sort of stuff. But like I would love to see Chocobo jousting like that.
So they showed that the scene in the trailer where they're all fighting on chocobos, and you know they've shown that like so many times throughout Final Fantasy history where like people are fighting on top of chocobos, and I cannot think of any like example where we've actually like gotten to do that. Can you guys?
No.
Oh man,
It's
No,
so
definitely
true.
not.
You have to jump
Yeah.
off in 15. Like you have to.
And
Oh,
Final
man.
Fantasy X, they had the Crusaders, but you never actually got to be on a chocobo and fight or anything.
Yeah,
That would be really cool. Like out in the open field, and you're just riding your chocobo, and you just, slash
Yeah.
somebody away.
Well,
Oh.
yeah, you can even have it like tournament format where you have like the whole setup, with the divider between you and everything like that.
You could go.
Like-
Yeah. Oh yeah. If you're talking, the jousting.
And-
I love the idea of jousting. I'm still set on that
you're
combat
talking
on a
about-
chocobo. It's just really good.
Yeah.
You could go Ghost of Tsushima, where you can
you're just talking about
like
straight up
stand
just
on the
mounted
chocobo and
combat.
jump off and like attack. That would be so cool, man. I
And
love it.
Devil
mean,
May
you-
Cry's Battle Planner. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
You know, it'd be really cool
gotta
actually.
be
It was
stylish.
like if it went beyond like gearing your own character. What if you like could acquire and like make armor for your chocobo too?
Yeah,
Like your
customization.
chocobo has like armor slots and stuff.
I love it, man. That's so good.
And it's not any different than Cloud fighting on a motorcycle. So
Yeah.
the mechanics are there. They just
Yeah.
gotta copy that.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
so good, man. I love the idea of like medieval games, just in general. Yeah, jousting for sure, but even just like fencing or like you said, the axe throwing and arrows. That would be really cool. Like, and what if every realm, well, not every realm, but most of the realms had their own like little coliseum or whatever, where you had to go and you can compete in each realm. That would be really cool.
Yeah, just like they just have
love that
festivals,
idea.
and that actually kind of works in because like there's like that kind of pagan element where they all kind of worship, so they can have like the festival to Shiva or something like that. And I'm obsessed with Ice and Fire, like Game of Thrones, the books and everything like that. Something happens, a new Hand of the King gets selected. They have games, they have a tournament, tournament of the hand, where they have the jousting and all that stuff. There could be stuff going on all over the world, and there, you just kind of pop in, and it's like, all right, I need some money, is there a melee or something like that? Win that, get some gold.
You can imagine that more tribalistic realm that we were talking about. I can't think of the name. You can imagine that they have their own like fight to the death coliseums or something. You know what I mean? For the
Dude, I would love there to be like a race of cannibals or something. Like you were talking about go all in with the rated M.
Yeah.
Like just like straight up speaking, like straight up just tribal cannibalistic.
Like a
There's-
Jamestown type thing.
There's speaking of like the tournaments and the Coliseum stuff, there's already kind of hints of that too, because they said that Clive ends up becoming Joshua's shield because he won some sort of tournament in order to become his shield.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
when they had like the Kingsguard and stuff like that, they would have tournament and the winners would be selected.
Man,
Okay.
you heard it here first, I think. Like I think once the next
Yeah.
trailer drops next year, I think we're gonna see it and we're gonna be like, man, we totally found it. We totally
Yeah. Now that you mention like fighting on top of a chocobo, I cannot get that out of my head.
Me either.
And I
want it.
feel like it's like, damn, why has no other Final Fantasy like really like leaned into this? Because one of the things, one of my favorite Final Fantasy games, and I don't talk about this too often, but I really love Type 0. And it's because Type Zero did like a lot of weird things, and it was also the other M-rated Final Fantasy, of course, not being mainline. But one of the things that they did that I found to be so sick was like the airship battles, and they were like these like almost like Star Fox 64 type like little shootout mini games, and I'm just like, man, this is super cool. I was like, why have we not done this like in a game like Final Fantasy 13 or 15 even? Like, I was like, man, especially because, you know, you have like the Magitech troops in 15 like flying around, and if the Rebellion Type F is up there, like, shouldn't you be encountering them? But I mean,
that would be awesome.
Yeah, and so that would probably be like my I know how difficult that would be to create. So that's not like, well, Final Fantasy 16 didn't have airship fights. It fucking sucks. No, but if if they can put that in there, that would be something that would be huge for me. That's like that's for me, that's what would push 16 to like game of the year 10 out of 10 type status if they could throw that type of stuff in there.
Like they did it with the gummy ship in Kingdom Hearts, man. Let's go.
Yeah,
more mature.
Yeah, we're fighting with the gummy ship, but we can't fight with airships.
Let's go all in. Let's just go all in with the medieval fantasy. Let's say you mount a dragon and ride and fly around on a dragon.
Dude, Reed, you missed it last week. Yeah. Man, Soldier had the idea of the year. He said, "What if?" Like, you know, because we're gonna go into the next part where it's about transportation. But he said, what if your final mode of transportation is that you've become the dominant of Phoenix and that's your airship? Like you basically become Phoenix and you can fly around the world. I was like,
you know where he got that
or
from?
Bahamut.
I'm not like 100% sure, but I feel like I know where he got that from, because I know what he's playing right now. He's playing Heavensward. And like in Heavensward, not to spoil too much, but like in like one of like the very, very epic fights, you get to like ride this dragon like across like this like super high-tech city, and it's amazing. And it's just like a super hype moment. So I think he was like leaning in on that.
That's 14, man.
But
they got the inspirations from 14.
The director who worked on Heavensward under Yoshida is actually the director for this title. So Heavensward is like Heavensward is what everyone's like looking at like right now for like clues for like what they're going to be doing with 16. And I think in like one of the concept arts too, that you can actually see a dragon. It's not very obvious, but if you look for it, you can see like a little dragon like tucked away. And so we're kind of like, oh man, are they going down the dragon lore route again?
That's exciting. Like, so so speaking of like transportation, I'm going to ask you, what would you like to see from earlier Final Fantasies return to the series in 16? For me personally, I would like to see the return of gated open worlds, which are unlocked. Like you can unlock the rest of the world through means of new transportation. That was such a key to the earlier games, and I loved it because I feel like it controlled the pacing. Instead of just going out into this massive open world and you can go everywhere, which seems to be the trend for open world games nowadays. I actually prefer when I can't get over that mountain range. You know what I mean? I can't get over there. I can't wait to see what's beyond that mountain range. But I need a ship to do it, or airship. I would love to see that return in 16. And based off of the map that they showed, there's a lot of potential for that. I see rivers running throughout the different realms. I see, you know, obviously you have to cross an ocean to get over to the western side, the western continent. And I would just love to see the gated open worlds where you need to have different means of transportation. Chocobos, obviously you start off with them, I think. And basically from there on you get, you know, cars, ships, and airships. That would be cool. What would you like to see return to Final Fantasy 16 from the earlier Final Fantasies?
I actually think that's my biggest thing. I actually am right there with you. And one of my biggest critiques of 13, 15, and even to an extent 7R is the world design. I don't really care if the game is linear or open world. I'm very indifferent toward that aspect, but for me, it has to be structured in such a way that it's a good open world or it's a good style of linearity, right? So you might use The Witcher 3 as a example for good open world design, and I would use something like Final Fantasy X as good linear design. They can lean into either one, but I think the thing of it is that I really want though is level design and pacing that strikes a good balance in between the two. And I think that's what the older Final Fantasies had, and they had that because of what you mentioned. It never feels like you're too locked into one single place, but they have ways that organically make you feel like, oh, well, of course I can't go over there because there's a mountain there, and that's just kind of how life works. Sometimes there's a mountain in the way. Sometimes like that's just how geography and that stuff works, right? So yeah, you got to wait until you get the airship and stuff, and then there's that progressive levels of freedom that you get from getting those things, right? When you get the car, you feel even more free, and then when you get the airship, you feel like a god that first time that you take off. And yeah, it's like that unlimited freedom, like and then also it's a nice reward for look, you've explored this whole world. This is a way so that you can further explore it even faster. And there we've laid all these like little secrets that you can get to now that you couldn't discover before without the airship. And now there's like a new game almost to explore behind that. And 15 did that a little bit with like the Piteos dungeon, for example, which
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah, through the Regalia type F. But I'd like to see that on a bigger scale with more intention behind it, because the Regalia type F was sort of I don't want to say an afterthought, but it was one of the last things that they finished in the development for that game. And that's one of the primary reasons why you can't really access it through like once it's post game stuff. Another thing that I really want to see return from the older Final Fantasy games, and this is going to be probably the most difficult thing for them to accomplish because they've said that it's the most difficult thing for them to accomplish in more ways than one. But I want to see like the same level of diversity of environments and places that we visit. And we haven't really seen that in a very, very, very long time. It's because assets are so expensive and so time consuming to make nowadays. When they said that there are going to be 6 realms, sadly enough, my first thought is that which one of these are we not going to be allowed to visit? Because I'm willing to bet like half of these are just going to be there like in the story. But like there'll be something like Final Fantasy 15 where you just kind of see them for like a minute and then that's it. They're more like yeah, I wouldn't like that at all, right? So so when they started talking about 6 realms, like I kind of got hyped, and I was like, man, I shouldn't be feeling hyped right now because only like 3 of these are gonna be explorable, and then the rest are gonna be like, you know, like set piece type stuff, or we'll just hear about them and things like that. So if they can actually give us that same level of diversity between all these different kingdoms and actually make them places that you can go to, which is something that I felt like the older Final Fantasies did quite well. Even comparing something to like the original 7 to Remake, you know, assets have gotten so expensive that we can't even make that many diverse environments anymore without like having to make it its own separate game, because that's how many assets making something like that requires, and it's astronomical budget wise. If they can somehow pull that off though and make it so that we can still see that same sort of old school Final Fantasy like world where you have this big old world map and you can actually go to all of the major realms within it, that would be like the most huge thing for me.
Agreed. Vinny, what would you like to see from previous Final Fantasies return?
I think I'm in agreement with you with the transportation, how you know it keeps going up and up, but also I enjoyed when they kind of took that away from you too. Like they give it to you, and you know the sand buggy breaks down in front of Cosmo Canyon and stuff like that. Like they didn't do it too much in 7, but in the Final Fantasies, I think it was what 5 is 5 the one with Galuf.
Yep.
And the princess pirate that
Ferris.
Yeah, Ferris. And like you get this like really cool like sea hydra, and it's like carrying your boat around for like 5 minutes until an octopus kills it. Like, but like, you know, they give you stuff and then they take it away. They empower you and you're like, oh, cool. And then they take it away and you're just like, all right, I should probably get used to that. Like,
Dude, I'm so happy you mentioned that because the big thing I was gonna say was I miss like water travel, and I
yeah,
was specifically gonna mention 5 because we all know how much I love Final Fantasy 5, but like that specific fight scene, like there's so much good stuff. Like it opens up so much, and in like a new modern setting, like with the technology we have now, you know, because back in the day you have these epic battles with you know, a Hydra or a, you know, a Kraken, but you know, it's just a little sprite standing on the back of a boat. You know, imagine seeing that, like the first fight with Sin in Final Fantasy X, where you're on the boat.
hmm
Just imagine where we can go with that, with like the new like a dark fantasy, Dark Souls ish almost setting. But I'm sorry, Vinny. Go ahead. You just
Oh,
you touched on like a big thing.
oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, that, and I think I would kind of like to see with, you know, the new engines or the new power that they're gonna have with the next generation of consoles, just the ability, like there's gonna be a war and or realms are gonna be warring and stuff. I'd like to see it. I feel like it would like give the illusion of doubling the size of the game or the world map, at least, if you know you get to visit these places, but then like let's say one of the one of the realms get destroyed, you can go back and visit that realm and it's a completely different biome now because you saw it when it was flourishing, and
Mm-hmm.
then it gets destroyed and now it's a completely new biome. So it's kind of like two different biomes in one. I feel like that would be cool. Like that, I really enjoyed going to different biomes in RPGs. Like Dark Souls 3 it does it in a pretty cool way, but then once you get to Irithyll, like it's a completely different like the moon is out, it's snowing. I enjoyed the different biomes of like Final Fantasy X, going from like the ice Macalania to the desert, and then to Bavel, which is a city, and then you go to Zanarkand, which is like this ancient ruins. Like there was just so much diversity, and it made the game feel so much bigger than just going through forest and forest and forest and forest. Like, yeah, they're different forests, different poison swamps, different all that, but it just still feels like you're locked in the same world. So,
And that's, yeah, and with what's cool with Final Fantasy X is that's in a pretty straightforward game too. But because of the way they do the settings and returning and all that stuff, it makes it feel bigger.
yeah, just diversity. That's what I want to see in this, the diversity of the biomes.
And they got the perfect setup there too, with these different realms within the open world. You can imagine that the realm up north is going to be more snowy. The realm to the west is probably going to be more desert. Like, you know, you kind of get that set up perfectly for different biomes within Final Fantasy
Yeah.
16. I think
The word of the day is biome, by the way.
I love it. Yeah,
Yeah,
It's
biome all the time.
big boy word there.
I know, man. Like I'm usually the word nerd, and Vinny's out here showing me up.
the,
I would.
the game that
Oh,
I
go on.
feel that does it really well is probably Oblivion, Elder Scrolls Oblivion. All the other Elder Scrolls, you're kind of like Skyrim, you're all locked into like the snowy area. I don't know if you guys have played Oblivion. It's personally one of my favorite RPGs.
Oh yeah, Oblivion is amazing.
But they, you know, they have Skyrim up to the north where you have the snowy mountains. You have Black Marsh. You have like a giant forest, and it's all, you know, like a 20 square kilometer map. You know, it doesn't take very long to go through the whole map, but it feels like you're actually going to different countries because of how they transition you from, like, you know, the bottom left part of the map is like a beach town, and you know it's kind of like think of like the Atlantic Ocean. You know, it's kind of like cloudy, you know, rainy, and then you travel north and you got like forests, and then you have like marshes, and then it goes up and you got Skyrim and the mountains and everything. So like it transitions very well, and I feel like that's what I want to see in these next generation, because I feel like they have the ability to do that even better now.
Well,
And
one the Kingdom of Wallowed off of FinalFantasy16.com. The Kingdom of Wallowed. Wallowed claims the entirety of Ash, the eastern half of Valisthea. So basically, just if it's ash, you can maybe think that it's kind of like covered in ash or something like that.
Volcanic.
And then you got stormy regions off the islands, and that's your tribalistic realm there, the Iron Kingdom, where the extreme faith that worships crystals reigns supreme. So that's
Yep.
I mean, it's just perfectly built for these different biomes, like you were talking about. So I think we will see that return to 16. So now, what's up? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Reed.
I was gonna say just one more thing I couldn't help but think of. And pardon me for my stupid jokes, but when we were talking about like transportation modes and stuff, I mean, first of all, I was just thinking about how much I would love that for them to bring the canoe back, but also talking about like how epic it is when you get like your airship and you're just like, the world is my oyster now. I was like, just imagine like in game or whatever, like someone just like gets this airship for the first time and they can do anything they want and go anywhere, and they just like take off and like go to a Fuddruckers. Just go to a Denny's.
The high wind set sail.
For Fuddruckers.
Prince, you mentioned recently on Twitter that Final Fantasy XIV is no longer the best modern Final Fantasy. It's one of the best Final Fantasies ever made.
Yeah.
First of all, I think we touched on it a little bit in the beginning. I want to know what makes you go to that point, like what makes you think that, and also more importantly, what elements from 14? Obviously, they share a lot of common elements, like the Aether, the icons, and all this other stuff. What elements from 14 would you love to see carry over to migrate over to 16?
Oh boy. So, with 14, one of the reasons I said that it was one of the greatest modern titles, when I was playing through it, it just had a certain Final Fantasy essence to it that I feel like a lot of the modern titles don't necessarily have anymore. This is excluding 7R, at least on this front, because 7R, of course, was Final Fantasy VII again. So of course it had that same Final Fantasy spirit. But in terms of like the actual newer titles that built the world, I feel like 14 seems to really capture the spirit of the series in a way in which I can't recall any other title has. But even deeper than that, even deeper than just being a Final Fantasy nostalgia fest, it tells new stories that are really, 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 really well written, that are just like make you kind of be like blown away even. And there are certain ways that they handle things, especially in Heavensward. They were just like, man, they really thought about this. Like if this was a real concept, this was happening with real people, how would they react in these situations? And they bring you into that. And it was at that point, and I just finished Heavensward, and like right now I'm into Stormblood, and the way they're sort of handling like the oppression of like the Alamegan people and stuff like that. It really pulls me into the world, and I feel so immersed in it, right? And that's what a Final Fantasy is supposed to be primarily, right? But then you add on the fact that you can play with your friends and you can have like these sort of experiences that you can't have in like the other Final Fantasy games. And it just becomes such a surreal experience to just sit there and enjoy this game with all of your friends. And there's so much content in it that you almost never run out. I say that, but there's people who run out as soon as like the next patch comes out. But those people are like those people have been playing for years. On top of that, though, the lore of the world is super interesting, and a lot of the raids and stuff are super optional stuff. But you can dig as deep into Final Fantasy XIV's world as you want to. Like there is so much lore and backstory and things to uncover and things to think about and theorize on. And the game is basically as deep as you want it to be. So if you only want it to be the main story, like it could just be the main story. But there's so much other stuff that's going on like beneath that you can dive into. And it got to the point of where I had to tell like my stream audience who's watching me play, I had to be like, look, we can't do any more side content. We got to go back to main story because there's like, oh man, you got to do this one raid because you get all this cool lore. And the stuff was actually, it was really cool. But it's like, man, there's so much stuff here that's like, I need to catch up with the story, and then I'll go back and piece together all the lore stuff, and I'll be like, oh, okay. And so it's because of that, though, that the world is basically as deep as you want it to be. And they're just constantly adding all this stuff that fleshes stuff out. It makes it feel like one of the most well-developed fantasy worlds that you just ever encountered. Like, speaking of Shadowbringers, even though I'm not there yet, there is stuff that sets up Shadowbringers that happens like post Heavensward, which is like, we're talking 2015. They were already setting up like events for the 2019 Shadowbringers expansion. That's how well thought out this stuff is, to give you an example that they were already thinking about plot threads they would be introducing 4 years later.
That's awesome.
And yeah, that's the type of thought that they put into Final Fantasy XIV story, to the point of where I can't remember, I want to say it was like a PAX or something that the writer for Shadowbringers was at, and they gave this woman like a standing ovation when they introduced her. And like the crowd just went on for a minute. So yeah, as you can tell, the Final Fantasy XIV community is very satisfied with this game, and it's for a good reason. So what I'd like to see from that carry over into 16 is just that. It's that level of, we put this type of thought into the story, and we're telling these stories that people can relate to. And this kind of is one of my criticisms of modern Final Fantasy, is that a lot of stuff that they try to introduce, I feel like, is not actually a relatable plot thread. So to give you an example, I don't know what it feels like for a loved one to have turned into a Lassie, and I don't know how to relate that to anything. I don't know what that relates to in real life. And for some people that's a very arbitrary argument, but for me it's a very big deal, right? Whereas you take something like original Final Fantasy VII, every single thing in there, like the live stream, I can relate to the cycle of death. Shinra, I can relate to any overgrown corporation. You can call Shinra like the oil industry if you want to, right? There's all sorts of things in Final Fantasy X. Yuna's journey, having society and religion thrust these expectations upon her, and all these other types of stuff. There's things in there that I feel like people can relate to. It's just like, in some of the later Square Enix stories, I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I don't know how to, I don't know what this symbolizes or what emotion this is supposed to bring to me. But in Final Fantasy XIV, these things are thought about, and they're thought about in ways that will have you crying over dragons. Like literal, like the politics of like literal dragons, and like I'm being so serious right now too, but it's like, it's funny though too. But like, yeah, like again, and like with Heavensward, for example, like they fleshed out these dragons to the point of where they were like, man,
where
dude,
you
like,
could relate to them.
yeah, you can relate to the dragons, and they do this thing where you start relating to the dragons more than you do your own like fellow like humans, or the races that look like humans. You start to be like, man, the dragons are like really going through some shit right now, and it's just like, yeah, and you feel it, man, you feel it, and
I like that.
But dude, like, I think that's what Final Fantasy traditionally has done really, really, really strong. And lately they have not been able to pull off in quite the same fashion, in my opinion, as they used to. And that is sort of the core essence of 14. And I want to see that come in 16. And I really don't have any doubt that this is the team that can bring that back into the light.
That's some good points there, man. I do want to just to say, because I mean there are people out there that can relate to these things. It's just like you said, relatable on a more broad spectrum, like where people can actually relate to. But like the whole thing, like with Lassie, and I'm sure there's somebody out there like, oh my god, I totally relate to that. You know,
yeah,
I think that's the beauty of I mean, obviously not being cursed by the gods or anything, but like, like in a different kind of sense, I'm sure, like a metaphorical sense or something. But I think that's the beauty of Final Fantasy in a way, is like every Final Fantasy has its own themes and its own like some people out here will absolutely love Final Fantasy 4 but hate 6, or you know what I mean, like or not relate to 6 at all, or not relate to a 7, or
I think the last Final Fantasy I related to was 9 because I was born with a fully functioning tail. And I just really
wait. What?
No, I'm just kidding.
I was like, I want to ask him about that, but I don't know.
I was
like, what's the respectful way to say "Are you serious?" to that?
Yeah, I skipped that part. No, I just got in a text. So like I was looking at my phone reading a text, and now you just hear I was born with a fully functioning tail. Anyway, hold on.
But very good point. Some Final Fantasies are a whole lot more relatable. I personally haven't played Final Fantasy 14, although now that the trial is goes all the way to the first expansion or beyond, I'm not sure, and it's all free. I might as well, right?
Yeah,
it is
no
actually
excuses.
Really fun. It's good.
There's no excuses.
Good.
I think the only thing that throws me out of that is the combat, where it feels more not even hack and slash, more just you're just beating a horse, just like, there's nothing happening.
Yeah. How'd you know who the first boss was?
Actually, to be honest with you, it's probably gonna. Oh, what'd you say, Reed? I'm sorry, I didn't.
I was joking. I said, how'd you know that was the first boss? Just a horse.
Oh, just a horse. Typical Final Fantasy fashion. You fight a horse and then a god. Later
combat's pretty solid, but I mean, I also play WoW and stuff. But
gotcha.
No, the hardest part for any MMO, especially Final Fantasy 14 for me, was just picking a class. It's so hard. Making a character takes me 30 minutes.
Yeah, I go with the warrior. That's just what I do.
So combat is going to seem very simple at first, and it's going to be very simple for a long time. I actually didn't really start to enjoy combat until I got to like level 60-ish out of 80. So
you have to grind through that road, push through it.
Yeah,
the story's pretty good though, so you go pretty quick. I mean, the atmosphere and everything's good too.
Yeah. And when you first start off, you're gonna have like a very simple rotation of commands, and it's just gonna be like, especially if you're doing something like DPS, and it's just gonna be like, oh man, this is the same shit every fucking fight. I just do like this circle of commands, and this is what I do. And then what happens is that they start to introduce a lot of commands that combo into each other. And then all of a sudden you're kind of like looking like in between your cooldowns, you're figuring out like how you're going to combo things together. And then you sort of have like a strategy for how you go about playing. And then that's when it becomes interesting. And then one of the other things that they do, particularly with boss fights to make them interesting is that the bosses will have very interesting mechanics. For example, there's this one crazy boss fight in Final Fantasy XIV Heavensward where you're like on like this like floating island. And I'm glad that we wiped because you don't hear that too often. I didn't know that we're not like landlocked. So I was like not paying attention and I ran off of the island and you just don't come back. You can't even be like, they can't even like cast rays on you. You're just dead for the rest of the
no. No.
But it's crazy though, because like you're like on like this like floating, you're like on like this floating piece of land. And then like you're fighting like this like it's almost like a sky whale like Sin. And like I think I actually jokingly called it like Sin in like my stream. And like there's even like a section where you have to run off of the island, hop onto like the thing's back, and then start attacking it too. So even though the combat is very simple, it's going to evolve later on in the game to the point of where they're constantly doing a bunch of like crazy shit, and you'll have to figure out a fight in like 2 minutes because otherwise you and your party member will get wiped like super fast. Yeah.
Okay, so they start to throw in a little more environmentally, like into the challenge of the fighting as well. So you have to traverse, hopping down different levels and stuff like that, and
Yeah,
Right.
it's
flying
not
around
just
on floating islands. And
Yeah.
it's
That's
not
cool.
just
I would
standing
love
still and
crazy
pressing the
shit.
same buttons. You got to like find a way to integrate your rotation into whatever's going on in the fight. So like, certain fights they'll start shooting a beam or a bunch of, bombs all over the map. So you have to like be able to run, find the safe
Hmm.
spot
Yeah.
and time your rotation, time your cooldowns and all that stuff. So it's actually
Yeah.
it's like a lot of situational awareness. Like learning
Right.
your rotation is the really easy part. It's just using it and getting the best numbers is actually kind of tough.
Right. So
Okay,
like,
yeah, that's. I wanted
yeah.
to bring it up just because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, kind of like me, where they're just kind of turned off by the whole MMO style combat, and then, but what you're saying now sounds exciting, and you just have to kind of push through the first couple hours,
Yeah.
first chunk of the game before
Well, it's
you start getting into that.
I mean, think about any Final Fantasy game, right? Like, what are you
Yeah.
doing for like the first few hours? You're
Mhm.
just mashing attack,
Yeah.
and then you have like a potion, or like you finally get cure, and that's like the big game changer. You have like fire, like blizzard, and that's like all you got. And then you're kind of just like rotating between that until like somewhere in the middle of the game where you're like, hey, I got options. I got like 2 or 3 summons that I can use now. I have like 6 or 7 different magics I can use, and then all this other stuff. And then from there, that's when you start to be like, okay, now I have some degree of strategy. And in 14, you can think of it a lot the same, where you're going to start off and you really ain't gonna have much of anything, and you're not gonna have much strategy about like what you can do or what you can use, and then you're gonna get deeper in, and you're gonna have like all these different tools available to you, and you're gonna be using those while doing some kind of insane mechanic for some boss fight too, which is crazy.
All right, I would love to see that. That's one of the things that you guys are talking about right now that I'd love to see transfer over to 16. I'd love to see more insane set pieces like floating islands, jumping onto a sin-like creature or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of stuff would be really cool. I'd love to see that a scale. Like you said with Devil May Cry Battle Director coming on board, that it's going to introduce style.
Yeah.
I would even like to see God of War size scale to where you're fighting a dragon like across an entire, like when you're fighting the dragon in God of War, like that would be so cool
Dude,
where these monsters that it become larger than life, you have to fight them. And I would love to see set pieces like that. Obviously with the icons that they have now, they're ginormous. So
Yeah.
like being able to take one of those down if you have to would be so cool.
I would love for
Um,
Bahamut to be the last boss.
Bahamut is there,
Yeah,
man.
because
Yeah.
You
he's the
know it.
king of the summons. So like,
I love
but
it.
like, fight it like you could do like a last boss where it's like a two-phase fight. You fight like the why can't I think of the word right now? The vessel for Bahamut, and
Mhm.
then you fight Bahamut. Like I just
Well,
because it seems like the whole concept of it is like fighting against. It's kind of like God of War in that you're fighting against the gods in which are summons in this context.
yeah, if you go back to last week when we were talking to Soldier, he he made the observation that all of them are part of the Drake, right? So obviously Bahamut is a type of a dragon.
Yeah.
So I was like, dude, if they go full Captain Planet, like with all the crystals combined, Captain Bahamut, you know what I mean? Like all the crystals come together and you get like
Oh.
Bahamut as the final boss. Oh God,
Yeah, man.
epic.
That'd be so dope.
So Vinny, you had a question about replayability.
Yeah, so one of the big things, well, somebody like myself and Daniel, we just play Final Fantasy VII just to play it every year, at least once a year.
Yeah.
But not so there are people who they play through it once and then there's really no reason for them to go back to it. I make my own replayability by doing like challenge runs, like my aforementioned I got Cloud and Barrett to level 99 before the Scorpion boss.
What?
And so I did that. I literally just finished. I told Daniel and everybody else the other day. I just did my Final Fantasy I, White Mage only, solo White Mage. So I beat the whole game with one White Mage, and that
How long did that take you?
it took me quite a while.
Yeah.
I care not to
yeah.
disclose that
Numbers not
information.
necessary.
My I don't want you guys to know how little of a life I have. Yeah, no, my White Mage was level 99, and I basically had to abuse Blink on every boss, and then giant gloves and all of that. So it's less of like skill, more you know, luck. Like hopefully chaos doesn't hit me 6 times before I can cast Blink, or stuff like that. But like I make my own challenge runs, and one thing I enjoy about like Dark Souls is New Game Plus. So I'm thinking like Final Fantasy 16 could have like a New Game Plus, or maybe something else for replayability, maybe uh, a separate storyline, or like just like small things like that, or another NPC's storyline, so you could see a story like intertwined, like what were they doing at this point, when they're off screen. You got to ask yourself, like, what are they doing, because they're off screen. So just replayability in Final Fantasy. Like what would you want to see implemented to make somebody who's not like me, where I just go back and masochist myself to do challenge runs, but like somebody who would want to play the game over again, but actually be rewarded for playing through it again, not just, play it again for the sake of playing it.
There's a couple of things that they could really do. I think that Final Fantasy VII Remake's hard mode was a really, really, really great addition. They change up enough about the game so that it feels like an entirely different game whenever you play it. It feels like basically like a straight up action game, because they give you enough experience to basically like shoot you right to level 50. And then once you're there, I mean, basically you're playing more like an action game, and you can't use items anymore. And so you're basically determining like the best materia setup and the best strategy to fight the boss. And so that type of stuff is really, really good. Another thing is, and I doubt they would ever do this, but I like the Near Automata style like endings where it like branches off and you might get like another small ending, or like Final Fantasy 13 too also kind of does this too. I doubt they would ever do that, but that would also be something that could also incentivize players. But I think more than anything is to basically offer the player like choices throughout the game that actually impacts either the narrative or the way that certain things play out, and to have those there to be like, man, I wonder what will happen if I go this way instead of going that way. And then lastly, I would also say that I think that having a job system is something that really, really creates a lot of replayability, because not only can you do crazy stuff with challenge runs, like what you were mentioning with that, like trying to beat the game with like one white mage or whatever, you can also you can be like, okay, well, I'm going to play entirely differently. I'm going to set up my jobs for all these characters completely different from how I did it the last run. And then I'm going to play with all these different job configurations. And especially doing that on harder difficulties, I feel like that alone adds so much replayability value, and allows the players to like really dive into the mechanics in a way that they wouldn't even on their first or second or third playthrough. Which, especially in an action game with a job system too, where you're going to have like the action game mechanics, and then you're going to have the depth that the jobs actually lay onto that and playing those roles within that action game system. That's really going to shake things up, and that would add like years of replay value. So I think the two things that they should primarily focus on is, one, giving the player some sort of branching choices where they want to go back to certain scenes and be like, man, I really want to know what happens if I go with this option instead of that option, and have it actually impact some stuff, particularly if it can impact something gameplay wise. And then two, to maybe have some kind of like job system or some sort of system that when you go through there, it really shakes up how your characters grow and develop in terms of their abilities and their stats. so that the game will just be radically different meta-wise every time you approach playing it if you try to experiment there.
That's awesome. That brings me into the next topic of solo or party. If you go with the option that you brought up, which was brilliant in my opinion, like if you have reintroduce a job class system, what if your party that you pick up depends on who you choose to be in your party? So like say if you want a knight or a dragoon, you recruit them to your goal. Basically, I would like to see Clive kind of stay, the all around badass that he's going to be, like just acquiring the powers of the icons and stuff like that. He can switch up on the fly, but the people that accompany him, to add a different kind of replayability, what if you could have a white mage in your party, but if you go back and replay the game, I guess you could have chose that to not be a white mage and maybe a black mage or something like that. Yeah, I think that would be really cool to be able to switch up your party members, because in a way, a lot of people want this to be a solo adventure. They want it to just be focused on Clive the entire time.
Yeah.
And this would be a way to do that, but also incorporate a party. Like, so you can have these people who just end up following you towards your ultimate goal of revenge, but they have their own personalities and they can all have their own stories. But I think as long as they're furthering Clive's development, I would like to see that. So that brings me to the topic of party or solo. And for me personally, I think it has all of the makings of a party, where you see this gigantic open map, open world, different realms that you're going to travel to, classic Final Fantasy style, where you go to a different city, you pick up a party member there, and they have their own motives and they're going to help you out on your journey. And I think that's what we're going to see. I think what we saw gameplay wise in the trailer, I believe that was probably the very first maybe 5 hours of the game. I don't think we're very far into it.
Yeah.
And I think we haven't even met anybody yet. So I do believe that we will have a party, whether or not we control the party or they're just there to support us or support Clive, is a different story. But what do you think about that, Night Sky Prince? I want to know whether or not you would want to see a party. First of all, like, do you want to see this to a party, or do you want to see it solo?
Okay. Well, I definitely want to see a party. I feel like it's like one of those fundamental things about Final Fantasy. And not even just Final Fantasy. I almost feel like the essence of JRPGs. And I think I'm stealing this from extra credits, I want to say. I'm stealing it from them, but they said that JRPGs tend to be more about the struggle of the group as opposed to the struggle of the individual. Now, the flip side of that is that we've only seen Clive's motivations, and Clive's motivation seems to be revenge, right? If his motivation is revenge, in order for other party members to join alongside him in his goal, just logically, they'd have to share that same motivation. And what makes me sort of be like, I don't know, maybe they will go with solo is that, like, how specific are Clive's motivations for it to only be him, or for it to be enough people to relate to his motivations in order to be willing to join him in his group? And that I don't know. Because if it's something very specific, like they killed his father and his brother and stuff like that, then why is anyone else going to care about that enough to, go on a life-risking journey to fulfill his revenge? So that kind of indicates that maybe that we won't see that, right? But also, like you said, I totally agree. We've only seen probably like the first 5 hours or so of the game. I think that the section that we're getting like in the beginning is going to be relatively like, it's probably going to be like 3 or 4 hours long, where you're playing as young Clive. And then I think that we've only seen like the opening hour, maybe, when you get to see him in his older state, and he's doing like a couple of things. But I feel like you might meet some people on the way there. But I can't imagine them not having a party, because even in Final Fantasy XIV, again, whenever you're not doing like, say, like dungeons or going on to other stuff where you have to join with other real world players, there's also the Scions of the Seventh Dawn, which are kind of like they're basically NPCs, but they also serve as your party within the narrative. So even in an MMO like Final Fantasy XIV, they still give you a party that you're with, and they actually join you for certain instance fights. So I can't imagine that this team would think that, oh, we'll give you a party for an MMO, an NPC party, but we won't give you like a party in like a single player Final Fantasy game. That seemed very paradoxical to me to do. So
That's a fair point. Yeah. I agree.
Something
man.
I would love for them to bring back, actually, while we're on that note, is like the older Final Fantasies when you get the temporary party members. Like, I get we were talking about Mystic Quest. You know, you do like a quest. You know, your party member leaves, you get another one. They leave, you get another one. And they cycle through like the whole game. They do it through Final Fantasy V pretty much, and well, actually 6 even more. So I would love for them to do that, where it's like kind of like on a quest by quest basis, and you know, you can just cycle people. And I love the idea of, especially if they're going like darker, like if a party member dies, they're dead. Like you can't
Fire
Oh.
Emblem.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Fire Emblem.
Tactics. Yeah.
And that's also is like a another thing that can add on replay value too if you went that route. But then it's hard to make them story important too. Fire Emblem has a way of doing that, but it's a very radically different style than how like Final Fantasy is. So I don't know if they can make that happen in the context.
Yeah, they'd probably even in that format there'd probably be some like a degree of plot armor for certain people, but
yeah.
I just like the idea of like let's say you go to one of these tournaments, these festivals or whatever with your jousting and all that stuff, and there's just like a red mage or something there saying, hey, there's like these ruins here, I need to get like pick something up, you want to help me out and get it? And if they die and you fail the quest basically. Or you can go in and get the stuff on your own, but you still fail the quest because they died. But I don't know, I like just as like a side thing, but then when it's like story relevant, well then you can pop those Phoenix Downs.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, Night Sky, before we move on to the Mad Libs portion of the evening, do you have anything else you would like to add on to the conversation of Final Fantasy 16 before we move on?
I actually do.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Benny.
So just touching on the party aspect, party or solo. So I think I want to see a solo Final Fantasy. You know, I completely enjoy the party aspect, but I enjoy the party aspect of like Final Fantasy X, where I can control all of them and it's turn-based. That's where I like having my party. But if this is going to be solo and I don't have like full control over my party, what I think would help supplement and maybe give like the illusion of a party is if Clive was able to like use all the weapon types throughout Final Fantasy. So if he wants to use a great sword, he can use a great sword. It'll be like kind of like having different builds. It'll supplement. Like Noctis can like sift through all of those weapons. It'll kind of be like having different builds, and it'll help supplement the party. But like, so if this was going to be solo and kind of like not a skill tree sort of like route for leveling up, but if Clive were to use a myriad of weapons and archetypes, what do you think would help supplement? Like, what weapons would you want to see in there that Clive can sift through? Maybe not like at a moment's notice like Noct can, but you know, if you like, it'll help build your play style. Like you can build your Clive to use what weapons you want him to use.
I don't think that's a bad idea, honestly, if they do go the solo route. In fact, I feel like that's the best idea. Again, going back to 14, like that's how 14 works basically, is that you can essentially there's usually like a little small job quest that you could do, and then after that you can just switch your weapon and then you're that class, and that's pretty much it. So being able to take that from 14 and put it in the 16, if Clive is going to be the only playable character, then yeah, dude, absolutely. In terms of what weapons I'd like to see, give him a gun.
was thinking that
Give him a
Pull
gun.
out my gun.
Give him a gun. I feel like that was like really cool. I remember like when like the Versus 13 trailers first came out, and this is in 15 now, of course. But I remember seeing like Prompto like taking his gun out and just aiming and stuff like that. And just like, I don't know, that's cool. You know, I'm a big Persona fan. So I mean, one of the things I love about Persona 5 is that I can pull a gun out in the middle of a turn-based fight. It's awesome. It's awesome. And then you have the Devil May Cry battle planner. So I just feel like pulling out a gun is just like very appropriate.
it kind of like as a secondary, like you're slashing with your sword and then you sidearm and fire a couple of shots.
Or even just put a gunblade in there, honestly.
I was about to say gunblade.
Yeah. Like allow me to just like, because you know how like Lightning's gunblade works, right? Like allow me to control that in like an action game context where I can just like flip the sword back and then it turns into a gun and then I start shooting and then I flip it back and it's a sword and then I can go whack them again. That shit's cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, even if not a gun, you could like kind of get the same mechanic with magic, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, like be able to like shoot, I don't know, a barrage of fire bullets or something. You know.
Oh yeah, they already kind of got that going.
Yeah.
You saw his little fireball blast that he was doing. Yeah.
So if you don't get the gun because like we kind of established like this medieval times type thing.
Yeah.
I know it's Final Fantasy, of course they can kind of mix in whatever they want.
Yeah.
but if there's no gun, you could still get that mechanic of like a long range thing where you just like shoot fireballs or use your icon ability or whatever.
Right.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. So moving on to the Mad Libs portion here, man. So this is going to be a Final Fantasy game. All right, that's the clue. It's a synopsis of a Final Fantasy game. I'm going to ask you for words to replace within the synopsis, and then I will read back your new synopsis to you, and you will. Hopefully, it'll be hilarious, but you're going to have to also decipher at the same time. Try to figure out what the heck game this is.
Okay.
All right. So you can also, go over to Vinny or Reed for any help if you want. Like if you can't think of a word, just pass it on to them if you want.
Okay.
So location.
Can be real or fictional, right?
It could be fictional or real.
Anything.
Yep. Anything you want.
Okay. I'll go with something random. The library.
Library.
So I was hoping for Fuddruckers.
All right, so we have the library. Now I need a noun.
Underwear.
Okay, that's good. And then another noun.
Dinner table.
And another noun.
Banana.
Okay.
It's a great fruit.
In the same location, so library. Okay, an adjective.
I hate how the only word coming to me right now is moist.
Yeah, oh, well, there it is.
There it is. There we go.
Oh, let's do it. I hate it. I hate it.
You can't escape it.
I'm like, think of something else in my brain. It's like, nah, dude, moist.
Verb ending in ed, so past tense verb.
Yeah.
Slapped.
Adjective.
Rough.
Okay. And then I gotta use the same noun here. Banana. All right. Adjective.
Heavy.
And verb ending in ed, so past tense.
kicked.
Okay. Adjective.
Colors are adjectives, right?
No, it's
No.
descriptors.
Oh wait, I don't know. I'm just trying to.
Color would be a noun, I think.
Oh yeah, you're right. Wait, no, they'd be an adjective.
No,
They're
because you're
adjectives.
describing
Well,
a noun.
Oh
Right?
well,
that's
Actually, yeah.
actually
yeah.
let's
So,
go
like-
with like warm.
Warm.
Yeah,
Okay.
using a color is too cheap.
Okay.
Yeah, descriptive color.
Yeah.
Okay. I just read it a little bit. And then the first location was a library. So I have to replace certain words because they appear a bunch of times. So banana and library.
So a quick Google search, colors are actually both adjectives and nouns, depending on
Yeah,
how
so
they are
just-
used.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when
that's what I
when he was
thought.
describing it as a descriptor, I was like, oh yeah, well, duh. You say like the
A
orange
yellow-
carrot.
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Like,
A noun.
Another noun.
Mhm.
sausage.
Okay. Okay.
Wait, I heard. What
actually, we'll go with Reed said. Okay, let's go with sausage.
Sausage. I'm sure there'll be another noun.
I came up with something lame like door. I was like looking around my room, like, what the hell can I say?
Oh God. Adjective.
Bright.
Right. Adjective again.
Cold.
And then a location.
Fucking Narnia. I don't know.
Can you include fucking Narnia, please?
It's all one word.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the library and banana. Noun. If you would have known that banana was going to be so important to this.
Okay.
A noun.
Oh man. Let's see. Let's go with actually I have no idea if any Read. You guys got me.
What is it, noun?
Yeah, I need to know.
Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh no.
Turning them into Rosie
No.
O'Donnell.
No.
I was gonna choose Michael Bublé.
Oh yeah, but, that's a good one too. Dude, if you listen to that while you're in the tub, is it a Bublé bath?
It is. I've done it before.
Oh no.
No, I haven't.
It's probably so relaxing.
Sounds
Oh, okay. Hold
relaxing.
on. Wielding. I gotta see. Make sure I get this right.
He said wielding. Oh God.
Yeah. Wielding.
Wielding
Probably a
Rosie
banana.
O'Donnell.
Rosie O'Donnell.
Another noun, please.
Sword.
Turning them into Rosie O'Donnells wielding swords. All right. And then the second. What was it? I'm trying. What the heck? This is all whack.
How long is this synopsis?
I need another a noun. It's almost over. It's almost
All
over.
right, got it. It's fine.
Since we went with sword, we'll go with gun.
Okay. It's just so complicated in true Final Fantasy fashion. This synopsis is very complicated.
We're on disc 3 of the synopsis.
An adjective, please.
Oh, disgusting.
There we go.
Disgusting. Disgusting. And then I need 2 more nouns.
Plot ghost.
Uh,
And another Let's see. Fuck.
I think fuck is a noun.
So
I mean-
I got one.
Okay.
Sora shoes.
Sora's
Sora's
shoes.
shoes.
Oh god. All right. Become
Uh-oh.
chosen by the bananas. I gotta read this back.
Oh god.
We're gonna get an email from Square Enix. And they're gonna be like, you
You're
guys
gonna
have to stop doing this.
Yeah.
We literally just lost the plot of Final Fantasy XVII thanks to you guys.
No, Rosie O'Donnell sausage will not be a downloadable DLC character.
Rosie O'Donnell's
Rosie
Oh,
O'Donnell
God.
wielding Sora shoes.
become. Oh my god, where am I at? And they become. Okay, it's fine. If it's a little wacky, it's a little wacky, right? All right, here we go. Here is the synopsis. The library, a utopia in the underwear. Its inhabitants believe their world a dinner table under the bananas rule. The library had long known moist prosperity. Then mankind was slapped by its protectors, the rough bananas, and believe that the heavy days would continue forever as their tranquility was kicked with the discovery of one warm banana on the slumbered peaceful library. Okay, the library came to an end. Bananas curse on humans, turning them into Rosie O'Donnell wielding swords. They become different swords chosen by the bananas. Those branded with the gun of Rosie O'Donnell carry the burden of either disgusting their plot ghost or facing a fate harsher than Sora's shoes itself or themselves.
Wow.
Oh man.
That last part.
I was waiting for the sausage drop. Wow, that sounded. Never mind.
Wait,
Yeah, nice
what
read.
did you just say, Reed?
So I was waiting for the sausage drop.
Sausage drop.
I was like, wait, hold on.
From Sausage.
Oh, hold on.
That was the moment that library from Sausage. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Would you like me to read it back to you one more time?
No, I think I got it. That's Final Fantasy 13.
What do you got? Everybody else? What's your predictions?
That was my guess too. 13.
Well, guys, whatever you do, there's always going to be good bananas and bad bananas. Okay, you can't stop the bad bananas from being bad.
I want Rosie O'Donnell's gun.
The gun of Rosie O'Donnell.
Yeah, that was 13, right?
Yeah, that was Final Fantasy 13.
Okay.
All right. The actual prologue. All right. Cocoon, a utopia in the sky. Its inhabitants believe their world a paradise. Under the Sanctum's rule, Cocoon had long known peace and prosperity. It wasn't very moist. Mankind was blessed by its protectors, the benevolent Foul Sea, and believed that tranquil days would continue forever. Their tranquility was shattered with the discovery of one hostile Foul Sea. These are also known as bananas.
Hostile banana.
Yeah, hostile bananas.
Need backup. Hostile banana.
The moment that Foul Sea from Pulse, the feared and detested lower world, awoke from its slumber, peace on Cocoon came to an end. Foul Sea cursed humans, turning them into magic-wielding servants. They became Rosie O'Donnell's gun. The Lassie chosen from the Foul Sea. Those branded with the mark of the Lassie carry the burden of either fulfilling their focus or facing a fate harsher than death itself. Final Fantasy 13.
Fate
All right, there.
harsher than bananas.
Right from the instruction manual.
That's it, right? I got it from the instruction manual. Right?
Oh man, I missed those.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
I
Sometimes
still
you
have
just want to
my,
bring them out and just look at them.
yeah,
You know
like
what I mean?
like how Final Fantasy VII had like the booklet and 10 had it too, where like it showcased all of its main characters and told you like their age and like what they like to do on Sundays and just like all this like stuff about the characters.
Now that the Ultimania has come out and it's been translated, it I can't look at it the same anymore. Like Final Fantasy, like all I imagine is Cloud wakes up from his sleep and he has to spend like 30 minutes in front of the mirror to do his hair and get it straight before he you know what I mean, like, they're like Cloud uses this hair gel and he spends about 30 minutes getting his hair to be spiky like this, and I'm like, yeah, but when does he do that? When does he do that? Like that's all I can picture now. Who took the time to do all that?
That would actually like blew my mind if like Remake like showed him like walking to the bathroom in the morning and like actually like styling his hair. I would have been like, oh my god, this is the greatest game of the whole decade, bro.
Taking down Shinra today.
Oh man.
Does the Ultimania tell you? Does the Ultimania tell you like what happened to the rest of Titus's pants? Like where did they go?
They were a dream all along.
They were a dream all along.
They just needed one more faith and he would have had the rest of his pants, but they cut it a little short. That's poverty con.
Yeah, poverty con. Yeah.
We speaking of translations and people who do it, we are going to have Audrey from Twitter on the show in December. So really looking forward to having her on the show and talking about her just amazing work in the community, translating these Ultimanias, and so it's going to be really exciting to have her on the show. Also in the works, I'd like to make the announcement of Vic Chow, the voice of Sung, leader of the Turks, will be on the show in 2 weeks, I believe. We're still in the talks there, so it's really exciting that we're getting we've been able to get the likes of Night Sky Prince, Soldier, John Eric Bentley, MJ Gallagher, and upcoming Audrey and Vic Chow. It's awesome that we're able to, we've been able to reach out to them and they're willing to take time out of their days to spend it with us. And Night Sky Prince, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it with us. I hope you had a great time, man.
Oh man, fantastic. You guys are awesome.
Nice. Thank you. I hope to have you back on the show one day. And we can, we can continue to talk about 16 and the hype leading up to it, and also Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Anytime,
and yeah, man, I want to try out 14 so I can have something more to talk to you about when you next time you're on the show. I'll be like,
be on the Primal Data Center. Server is Excalibur. Please get on there.
That's what we should do is let NSP get caught up on 14, and you'll have started by then, and then kind of share the experiences.
Now, do you play on like what is that only for PC or is it
no?
On
It's PS4 as well.
Yeah, PC, PS4, and I think PS5 supports it through backwards compatibility as well.
And what do you play it on?
I play it on PC, but it's also crossplay. So if you want to play it on PS4, you can totally still meet up with all your friends on PC, and you can plug in a mouse and keyboard into your PS4 and actually use that too.
Okay, nice. I think I'm gonna finally give it a shot. I think
it's about time.
Dude, it's great. Right. I actually play with the mouse, keyboard, and a game controller at the same time on PC. Because actually, the way they map your keys on the DualShock is actually amazing, and so it just makes it like really easy and relaxing to play. And then whenever I need to type or click something, I just use my mouse and keyboard. But it's actually it plays very good on a controller.
Well, that's good.
I think I'm gonna make the cross and finally play Final Fantasy MMO. I've always been shied away from it because like I just never had like the time to. I played Destiny a lot, like Destiny 1 when Destiny 1 came out, and the problem I felt with Destiny was like if I ever wanted to take like a 2-week break, I feel like you were just left behind so like immensely, and that's what I didn't like about MMOs. But it's Final Fantasy. I got to do it.
Yeah,
there's so much more to do in 14 also. Like I tried Destiny, man, but it's like doing the same like 5 dungeons and like same like 3 zones a million times for like the progress you're getting. Like I'd rather when you can step away from 14 and come back and be like, oh, I still have to do like this whole leveling zone. I can run one of like 12 or 13 dungeons as opposed to like 4 and raids and everything. There's just a lot more.
Yeah, 14 is an RPG that happens to be an MMO.
I like the way that sounds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Vinny, maybe we'll run through it together.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
might
yeah.
repop my account back on if you guys are gonna play.
Yeah, let's do it, man. All right, Night Sky Prince, thank you so much for joining us for this awesome podcast. It was a privilege to talk to you, man. Thank you for all that you do within the community of Final Fantasy. I really respect your work, man.
All right. Thank you so much, man. Glad to be here and hope to be back.